Hello everyone. In this video we're going to talk about the 5 arithmetic operators that are part of C#. Now for those of you who haven't taken math in a while, I myself being one of them, arithmetic operators are plus, minus, multiply, divide, and in this case modulo. Now the plus, minus, multiply, divide, I'm sure everyone's familiar with. What many of you probably aren't familiar with is modulo. That's a little percent symbol here. So we're going to talk about these 5 arithmetic operators and how they're used in C#. And we're going to go ahead and just look at some basic examples of them. Now let's go ahead and let's start with the addition one. Okay, this is an additive operator. Now to keep things simple, additive operators are both plus and minus. Multiplicative operators are multiply, divide, and modulo. And the reason for that is simply that's how C#'s documentation classifies them. Now, if you want to see, there are a lot of other operators besides just the multiplicative and additive ones. This is all part of Microsoft's docs. And really, a lot of people go ahead and think that when you're talking about operators in a programming language, that you're talking about plus, minus, so on and so forth, and then maybe you're talking about the comparison operators, the assignation operators, okay? Things like that, the ands and the ors maybe, but it actually is comprised of a lot more than just that. It just happens to be that, for the most part, the term operator, if people think of that, they think back to math, and that then leads them to the additive and multiplicative operators. Now, let's go ahead and let's look at some examples. We'll go ahead and start with the plus. Now, we're going to go ahead and use the var data type, and that's simply so that we can go ahead and not have to worry about whether we're doing ints, floats, so on and so forth. So var a equals 5 plus 6, console.writeLine a. This right here should go ahead and produce 11. I'm adding 5 and 6 together. And there we go, 11. The addition operator is just as you would think it would be used in math and any other programming language. It's simply going to take 2 values and add them together, sum them up. Okay? You can go ahead and you could string them together. You could go ahead and put more than 1, 2, 3. You could go ahead and take a variable after the fact and add to that variable. You also can use the addition operator in a shorthand method here, which is to go ahead and say a equals plus equals 2. Now these two here are exactly the same result. I'm saying a equals whatever a currently is plus 2. This is saying the same thing in shorthand, saying take a and add to it 2 and reassign it back to a. Now this right here will obviously no longer result in 11, but this is just how you can go ahead and see the ways that you may use the addition operator. The same exact thing can be said for the subtraction operator. And this should go ahead and result in 1. There you go, 1. That is the latest one we did. There. Just like with the addition operator, you can go ahead and you can string together multiple values, negative 30 in this case. And again, just like with addition, you can go ahead and write this as shorthand. B minus 2, or you could do B minus equals 2. And these would go ahead, and again, these two lines would have the same exact result. Now, of course, you can go ahead and, before we move on to multiplicative operators, you can go ahead and have a combination of different operators. I could do 3 plus 50 minus 20. Okay. That's going to give us what? 33. Okay. So you can combine operators all in one line. You're not restricted to doing just all subtraction or all positive. The only case where that would be is if you were going to go ahead and do the shorthand way here. I could go ahead and I could combine the different operators if I was writing the longhand way of reassigning to a variable, but for the shorthand way, you're restricted to whatever you've put here in front of the assignation sign. Now for these next ones, I'll go ahead and just do them briefly. Multiplication and subtraction. It's exactly what you think it's going to be. 2 times 5 is going to go ahead and give us 10. The last value I have there is 10. That's the last one I printed on the screen. And then you've got, let's do 5 divided by 2. Console.writeLine E. Okay, so if I go ahead and I run this, I'm going to end up with 2. Now, here's where I want to pause. With all of these other variable types here, I'm using whole numbers, and I'm assigning to a var variable type, which means it's going to go ahead and figure out what kind of data type it's supposed to be on its own. Now, all of these are going to result in whole numbers. So they may be negative numbers, but they're still whole numbers. 5 divided by 2 will not result in a whole number. I'm going to end up with 2 and a fraction. 2 goes into 5 2.5 times. Now notice that when I ran this, it went ahead and resulted in a value of 2. That is because var will go ahead and figure out what kind of variable I need to be. E needs to be. And it's going to look at, well, what am I doing here? I'm dividing two numbers. However, I'm dividing two integers. Or in C#, if you wanted to go ahead and get a fraction, at least one of these would have to be defined as a float, okay? Or a decimal. Okay? Now, if I were to go ahead and run this again, I'm going to end up with 2.5 because I told the code basically that this one is a float, meaning it is a fractional or potential to be fractional number. And then it doesn't matter whether this is or isn't, the 2 is or isn't, because I've already said at least one of these is. So now the result has to be a potentially fractional number, which would go ahead and mean that E becomes a float. Now, division is going to go ahead and perform just like multiplication. You're going to get the kind of results you expect. You're performing division on a number. You just want to make sure you pay attention to whether you're doing a whole number or a fractional number, and that'll change what kind of result you get. Now, the last one we're going to go ahead and talk about here is modulo. Now, if I did 5 modulo 2, five modulo 2 is going to result in the return of 1. That's because modulo performs division, and then it gives you back the remainder. Right? 5 divided by 2, the whole number result is 2, and the remainder is 1, because 2 goes into 5 once, twice, and then one more. Yeah? Which obviously is not, 2 cannot go into 1. So that's why we end up with a value of 1. Modulo returns the remainder. Now, if we were to go ahead and look at what we did with division and say, okay, I want to do 5 as a float modulo 2, you're still going to get 1. That's because even though I'm saying a float, and yes, f, or 5 as a float divided by 2 does result in 2.5, modulo says, no, give me a whole number. I don't care whether this is a float, a decimal, or a whole number. Give me back a whole number, and then whatever the remainder is, that's what I am returning. So that's why our f will go ahead and result in 1, whether one of these is a float or not, floating point number or not. Now, not going to go ahead and talk about any of the other operators in this case, but what I do want to point out is some of you may remember PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, and it has to do with order of operations in math. And that's when you go ahead and you look at a mathematical equation that has different operators in it, like plus, minus, multiply, divide, powers of, you go ahead and group things in parentheses. Okay? It will go ahead, and that applies also to C# in operators. And they'll go ahead and add up, multiply, subtract, divide, perform different operations on your code in the same order that math does it in. Things that are wrapped in parentheses happen first. Things that are powers of happen first as well. You have multiplication is before divide. You have, multiplication and divide are grouped together. You've got plus and minus grouped together. Okay? It will go ahead and follow the order of operations. To go ahead and see that, let's just do a simple one real quick. We could do 2 plus 3, which gives us 5. Okay? And then we're going to multiply by 3. Now, multiplication is more important than addition. So if that was the case, you'd go ahead and have 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. However, these two are grouped in parentheses, which means it should do 2 plus 3, which gives us 5, multiplied by 3. So we should have a result of 15. If we go ahead and run this, you'll see the result is 15. And that's just showing you that the order of operations does hold true even in programming. And that right there is just a little crash course on operands. As you saw from that list of operands, there's a lot more that are part of, operators. There's a lot more that are part of programming, not just C#. This list is pretty much the same across any programming language. But it's very important that you know the core ones when it comes to multiplication, addition, divide, subtraction, and modulo.